I can't get no call to action, but I try, and I try, and I try.
Hello and welcome to Call to Action, the go-to podcast for anyone trying to make sense of the world of marketing, business and beyond. In an industry that is a minefield of utter bollocks, we aim to capture our heroes and allies from the front line to have a chinwag with. It's like Pokemon Go, with the single but vital exception that it's not a short-term bandwagon of shite. It's brought to you by Gasp and I'm Giles Edwards. Today I've caught Connor Archbold and Matt Herbert. A couple of Kiwis turning the world of brand tracking upside down. Connor and Matt are co-founders of one of Australasia's fastest growing startups, Tracksuit. Backed by friend of the show Mark Ritson, Tracksuit is making brand tracking 10 times easier to understand and 10 times more affordable. Crucially, it's a simple way for marketers to track brand health, demonstrate return on marketing spend, and answer the question, is what we're doing working? They say, building brand grows future demand for products or services. Strong branding means acquiring more customers who will add more value over time and building a moat to safeguard against competition, downturns, or hordes of performance marketers. Welcome to the show, Connor and Matt.
Thanks, Giles. Happy to be here.
Hey, thanks, Giles.
Nice one. Right, we've got 7 quick-fire questions. We're going to start with you, Connor. Mac or PC?
I have to go Mac.
All right, Matt. All blacks or black caps?
Whoa. All blacks. Just.
Connor, Kea, Kiwi or silly goose?
Oh, silly goose every time.
I love that one. Right, Matt. How brands grow or the long and the short of it?
The long and the short of it.
Brand building or future demand?
Future demand, surely. Of course.
Of course, of course. Okay, Matt, rather ridiculously, the hacker or the tracker?
Oh, the tracker, but I'm known to be a bit of a hacker out on the golf course as well, so here we go.
Nice. Okay, lastly, Connor, controversial one, togs or undies?
Well, I'm definitely togs with the dad bod over here, but Matt Herbert, I'd say he's more of a budgie smuggler guy himself.
Can you confirm that, Matt?
Oh, no comment on that.
No comment.
I'm a strong budgie smuggler fan, absolutely.
Nice, be proud, be proud. Listen, thanks both for joining us. So to kick things off, we always ask every guest about their path to where they are now, and we find that more often than not, it's rarely a linear one. So Matt, can you start by telling our audience what was your first ever job, and then what was your first proper grown-up job?
Yeah, I was having a think about this just before, and myself and a couple of friends started a landscaping business when we must have been 12 or 13, going through high school and college around the local community. So I think it was a entrepreneurial landscaping business. No idea what the hourly rate was, but we were out there cleaning gardens and pools and chopping trees down, and that was probably the first job. And then the first proper job was a couple of years labouring on construction sites. So that's where it all started.
So fairly physical stuff. When you were younger, did you have any intention to go into the marketing world? Like, did you study anything related to what you do now, or did you have different kind of dreams and aspirations?
So I studied law and science. The reason I had no intentions of, I wasn't exactly thinking about the brand and marketing space. Down at university, I ended up getting a job and working part-time for a radio station as a brand ambassador. And so I think that was probably the first real entry into the world of brand and marketing. And I had one of the best jobs ever at university, taking radio winners skiing up the local ski fields, getting paid to host people there. And so I thought this world of brand and radio and brand ambassador was quite a good fit. And so maybe that's where it started to lean away from a professional legal career.
Yeah, that sounds like quite the gig.
It was fantastic.
You should hear Matt's radio voice. Give the people what they want, Matt. Give them the ZM radio voice.
No, we don't need this. We don't need this.
Okay, fair enough. And then, so at what point did you kind of commit to to this world that you're in now? And how did that happen? Was it literally that radio gig?
Yeah, so going through university, I had an opportunity to join the early stages of the Uber team as Uber was launching into New Zealand, and so I was boots on the ground, getting everything set up down in Christchurch in the South Island. This is before the regulations, and Uber had been kind of a thing that was happening across Australia and New Zealand. It had a big brand and was innovating and relatively well known overseas, but it was a startup mentality, early stages, back when it was still taxis were the main way of getting around. And so working with the launch team, being a part of the Uber launch and setup in New Zealand, I think that's really where it started to turn to say, innovating companies of industries that have been around for a long time, brands led, and also bring kind of that tech and innovation to an industry. And so that there works for a couple of years before moving across to Australia with another New Zealand company where Connor and I actually met 7-8 years ago. And that was a Snapchat management platform that we were working with. And so working with the likes of McDonald's and Red Bull and Coca-Cola to leverage Snapchat as a new channel that was coming out. And so from Uber to work in the world of Snapchat, and then both reconnecting with Connor and back in New Zealand to take on this world of brand tracking and marketing technology is kind of the pathway that I've had over the last little while.
Oh, I can see that now, that kind of consistency of innovation, that kind of startup and tech world. What about you, Connor? What was your first ever job and then your first proper job? Presumably when you crossed paths with Matt.
No, well, I'm a little older than Matt, so hence the dad bod. But I was a lawyer. My first ever job, I worked at one of those like cheesy surf shops in a mall. So that was quite fun. But I did landscaping on the weekends, so I'd like to pair those both up. And then my first job, I was a lawyer, corporate lawyer. Did that for 3.5 years. Kind of learned what it was to work really hard at things, and then thought I want to get into startups as people do. And then found myself helping launch Auckland's first accelerator program. And then through that process, met the team at the Snapchat management company and ended up joining, and me and Matt now are working in the same office that we met in. It's been demolished and rebuilt, but it's on the same property, and that's where the Tracksuit team is based now. So it's come full circle. Pretty cool.
Nice. So there's consistency of law in both your backgrounds as well, which isn't uncommon, I've found, in this industry that we're in, particularly when it comes to startups. So that's really interesting. And so how did Tracksuit begin then? What was that based on? What were your kind of intentions with Tracksuit? When did you see the opportunity? Because I half expected one or both of you to have some kind of almost obsessive bias towards the fundamentals of marketing, which I'm not suggesting doesn't exist, but I probably thought that it came through some form of classical training you might have had prior to kicking off.
I think therein lies the success of Tracksuit. And when we started, so Matt and I both kind of came back to New Zealand right when COVID hit globally, and we were kind of hanging out with some brilliant brand strategists and market researchers, the brand strategist James Herman and working out of Previously Unavailable, and the market researchers at a place called TRA. So with those lenses, as well as me and Matt coming from like a MarTech and SaaS background, kind of combining all of our strengths was really where the idea came up, and how we sort of built the MVP. The problem that we were obsessed with, that we were all talking about, was the fact that consumer brands at that time were growing and kind of constantly hitting a ceiling. And we wanted to figure out why that was happening. And Matt and I were both really interested in that. We didn't have any answers, so we were talking to TRA and James about that problem. And so then we came up with the hypothesis, under the guise of what gets measured gets managed. We came up with the hypothesis that if we got brand tracking or top of funnel metrics into the boardrooms and C-suites and into the hands of founders of, modern consumer brands much earlier than they would normally be able to get it, then we might be able to blast through that ceiling, alongside them. That essentially, that was the hypothesis that we went to market with. Turned out there were a ton of people that kind of wanted a beautiful, affordable version of brand tracking. They were marketers who were familiar with brand tracking, but they couldn't afford it. They also weren't interested in 150-page slide packs, being delivered 3 to 6 months after they needed them. And so they were willing to jump on board and kind of snowballed from there. So, we've subsequently launched into Australia and the US and UK, and it's been a wild ride.
There's of course a need. I mean, I say this as someone who, is quite well known to run an agency advocating for brand and strategy. And we've been running a series of events for years now called Reclaiming Marketing's Seat in the Boardroom. And I think at the core of it is that understanding of brand value. But I wonder for you, in terms of launching Tracksuit, and I'm sure it's not as simple as I'm going to kind of suggest it is in my question, but to me, there's two real big problems which you're probably faced with. One is just accessibility of brand tracking, which I think this then comes along and completely wipes that problem out, because it is so much more accessible than historically has probably been the case for most businesses. But two, do you have much friction with marketers and businesses understanding the fundamentals and the need for brand tracking? You used a line there, what gets measured gets managed, and there's a sort of turn on that phrase, what gets mismeasured gets mismanaged. And I think the metrics which have been, you can't move for the sort of digital, it's not always digital, and I need to be careful not to always seem to have beef with digital and lower funnel type of activity, because that's certainly not the case. But there are all sorts of analytics and dashboards available to us which are pretty meaningless as soon as you look under the bonnet.
I think it's not a case of one or the other. It's a case of doing both. There's plenty of, from a performance, sales, conversions, there's a whole lot of data and dashboards and analytics out there which plays a really important part in growth of businesses. And as we looked at, from a performance side, to say, that's covered. There's plenty of tools out there. But when it comes to the concept of future demand or long-term brand building, how do we create a beautiful, simplified way of helping to measure, understand, and communicate the value of the brand play? So long-term brand building, as well as short-term harvesting existing demand. If you've read James Herman's book on future demand, highly recommend that. It's just these two concepts, breaking marketing down into two concepts: future demand, building for the future, people that aren't ready to buy from you right now. How are you continuing to build top of mind awareness and consideration, and then when they're ready to buy, then you're converting effectively through performance marketing and bottom of funnel. So that's probably that's the problem that we look to solve, is to say bottom of funnel, great, lots of tools out there, really important part to play, and at the same time your brand building, and let's create something that gives that visibility in a simplified common language to take that to the boardroom and execs and build confidence in doing both to build great businesses.
Yeah, well said. I feel like, just quickly, I feel like Les Burnett and Peter Field had to almost spend a year or two post long and short of it being released of reminding people that there's an and in the title, not an or. We've always liked the metaphor, watering the tree and picking the fruit, and I think metaphorically at least that works with my very simple mind.
We've been very lucky to ride a wave of change in marketing that's happening, and it's totally reasonable for brands over the last 20 years to have absolutely overinvested in digital and conversion, because you could build a $1 billion business doing that. And it's, over the last 5 years since iOS 14 has kicked in, and the cookie-pocalypse, as people say, there's been a sea change of people looking to say, oh yeah, how did you build businesses before the digital marketing revolution? And we're going to start doing that. And fortunately, we've been able to jump in with a tool that matches their expectations for, measuring and understanding the top of funnel. And they need tools to measure both now. And, like Ritson says, you got to have both of them. And so we're here to provide the solution to that top of funnel measurement.
So, and Connor, can you summarize how, in fact, I'm going to put a great quote that's lived on our website for years from the late, great Jeremy Bullmore. And it's from one of the famous talks he gave, the Posh, Spice and Personal talk. And he says that brands are fiendishly complicated, elusive, slippery, half real, half virtual things. When CEOs try to think about brands, their brains hurt. So what type of measures do you provide to CEOs and the wider businesses to help them understand these fiendishly slippery things?
I think we're not reinventing what brand tracking is, and it's part of the reason that we've grown so fast. So we're still providing those same metrics that a lot of people are familiar with, awareness, consideration, preference, your brand sentiment, what people think and feel about your brand. But the way that we're doing it is, in a well-designed and usable way, and everyone in the business can log in. We have some customers that have 30 to 40 logins in their business across agency, creative teams, media buy teams, board, C-suite. And I think that by making it more accessible, the first problem that you alluded to, Giles, the accessibility, by making it more accessible, it sort of finds its way into conversations, and then brand is at the forefront of people's minds. It may not happen in the first month or two of using Tracksuit, but if you're bringing, awareness into every meeting, then you start paying attention to it over time, and that's what's important.
Yes. And also you then kind of avoid that, the horrible, I've seen in our research for today's show, you talk really encouragingly about having a common language, and whether that is something that is made available through Tracksuit, or even things like, Mark's mini MBA courses, where suddenly you've got thousands of marketers coming out at the other end, all using the same terms. And I think semantics causes so many issues in this industry. So for you to not only make brand tracking accessible, but to make the terms used in understanding the value of brand and the significance of brand to a business available to everyone from C-suite to, as you just said there, 30 to 40 plus logins within a business, is only going to make for a better business, I imagine.
I think that's really well covered, and absolutely the common language. And I think this comes down to the concept of, it's very hard to sell to someone that's never heard of you. And so really understanding in a simple way, what's the job to be done as a brand? Do more people need to know about us? Once people do know about us, that's great. What are they knowing us for? What are our unique selling propositions? What are our points of difference? How commercially are we growing these businesses, and being able to do that? And I think also not looking at your own brand or your business in a siloed manner. It's going, how do we actually compare to our competitors? If we think we're growing and we're in our niche, we know our brands inside and out, we think everybody knows about that. But when you go out to the market and it's saying, where do we look like? We're growing, 10%, 12%, but everybody else is, growing at 20, 30, 40%, then there's still a job to be done. And I think that there becomes a really effective way of saying, what's happening in the market? Where are we performing? And then how does that compare? And we can have some really great strategic conversations that then makes it down, ultimately to the bottom line, and the confidence and investment in the right areas, because we're tracking it, because we're able to prove it, and drive strategy with the right tools and measures in place from the top right through organizations.
One thing that's amazing is, we work with a lot of, I guess, early stage growth brands, and one of the things we constantly see as they're embarking on their first brand tracking read is they've been in a bit of an echo chamber by optimizing the bottom of their funnel and only talking to their customers and like a very niche ICP, ideal customer profile, which you do as you're optimizing that bottom of funnel. And by lifting out of that echo chamber and seeing like what people think about them versus their competitors, and that maybe their awareness is only at like 10% in their category, and they would have assumed that it was at 50 because they've just been hearing these same messages kind of back to themselves after repeating them over and over again to their customers. People are quite shocked, and then they're doing things like doubling their budgets and investing that in out of home or novel media for them, and focusing on increasing awareness, because they tend to have very good conversion through the funnel, awareness down to preference, say, because everyone that knows them loves them because they've done such a good job of that. But the job to be done when they're at that 10% mark is to start increasing awareness and then build brand love amongst new audiences, and then slowly convert those audiences into loyal customers who prefer them as well.
Yeah, brilliant. I think your point on the competitors are so significant, because people do become so insular in understanding their brand. And without trying to make this a weird Jeremy Bullmore kind of fan fetish show, there's another line of his which I've always loved, which is along the lines of a brand's success is dictated as much by its competitors as it is by itself. So that significance of understanding your performance is always relative to the competition. In terms of competition and Tracksuit's own competition, how much of that is other research businesses and potential suppliers, and how much of that is, I don't know, ignorant seems like an unfair word to use, but I think it's used with the best intention of people not truly understanding that they can measure their brand as well as, historically we might have all believed we could.
One of the interesting things that we saw when launching Tracksuit was that we were serving a part of the market that just did not have access to brand tracking and brand and top of funnel metrics. And so they were about 50% of our customers were doing an annual dip, which for people that don't know, that's like, a one-off 1,000-person sample, usually maybe general population sample to find out if people are aware of their brand and what they think about it. And that was basically what 50% of the customers doing. The other 50% were not doing any sort of market research. And so, we were opening up the market research category, the brand tracking category, to a whole new group of customers and people who are excited about it, which is great. In terms of our competition, there are the big market research houses, but we don't come up against them that much with the people that we serve. And when we do, it's do you need $200,000 worth of very bespoke market research, or do you want a best practice standardized version that costs $20,000? And that tends to be there's a clear line there, and very large enterprises will choose one way and everyone else will choose the other way.
And do you find talking about brand building as future sales or even future demand, do you think that's a better way of articulating it? And have you seen more success from that positioning?
Yeah, I think there's I think it's going down to this concept of it's hard to sell to someone that's never heard of you. And so there's two jobs to be done, and looking at I think James speaks really well to the idea of who has bought a phone in the last week, or might be buying a phone in the next month. And at any given time, that might be 5% of the total market. And so, what are you doing to the 95% of the others that at some point over the next couple of years are going to be coming into that buying decision? And so, how are you staying top of mind? How are you becoming familiar and more familiar, so that when people are ready to buy and you can optimize that sale and conversion, you've got a better chance of doing that. And I think that they're, simplifying it down, breaking into two concepts. What are we doing today? What are we doing tomorrow? And that both ways, it has a great impact. The way that you build your brand is going to impact performance and conversion metrics down the track as well. And so I think, this language and these concepts, trying to simplify it down to the fundamentals of, how are we going to continue to build long-term sustainable brands is resonating really well from what we see, and something that we also want to keep really close to, is to saying what is being understood, what's not being understood, how do we simplify it down, but how do we also have a big impact on creating great brands, build even better businesses. And so I'd say early days, new concepts, but good traction and resonating well at this stage anyway.
One of the key talk tracks that we saw at the Cannes Lions Festival about a month ago was the CMO speaking to the CFO and sort of how to talk budget, especially in a downturn like we're seeing globally right now. And, we've written a lot of blogs and talked a lot about, and we send everyone that signs up to Tracksuit a future demand book. And like the idea of talking as a CMO or a marketer, talking to the board or C-suite and calling it future demand instead of brand equity, everyone should just try it because it seems to work. Like it's language that people understand, that they can get around, and yeah, it's been wildly successful for creating interest in that pool of the 95% who aren't ready to buy. Right?
Yeah, I think there's always, in the time of running Gasp, so we're 14 years old now, and I remember in our early kind of years, there was such a strong perception of marketers being the colouring in department, and it wasn't helped by, marketers themselves and how we would talk as a, broadly speaking, as an industry. We almost set ourselves up to be seen as being quite fluffy. And whilst there's a lot of value and significance of brand awareness, instead of saying brand awareness and calling it future sales or future demand, whatever it might be, or even, value or business value or whatever it might be, just using metrics that CFO would understand is so significant. I don't remember which of the courses it came up in, but I do remember Mark Ritson saying something along the lines of sales and marketing are the same thing, separated by time. And I think that there's ways of articulating what it is we do as an industry that will help people understand and actually respect what marketing delivers. And I think that actually taking some accountability for that as an industry, rather than, blaming businesses which might be more sales orientated or product orientated, is a good place to start. And the fact that Tracksuit makes that possible is huge. Matt, you talked about it, or at least referenced the fact that it's early days. What does the future hold for Tracksuit? Is it as simple as just being able to serve more business types and sectors? Because you're predominantly B2C at the moment. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I think we look at what we're ultimately building is to help drive strategic growth conversations of the best brands of today and tomorrow, and that's what we're building Tracksuit for, and that's what we always look at and refer back to is to say how well are we doing that. I mean, the last 2 years have scaled and found really good product market fit, and been scaling well across Australia and New Zealand. And after raising our first seed round at the beginning of this year, where you referenced Mark Ritson and a few other great partners have come in to allow us to bring it to the Northern Hemisphere, and to say the immediate focus is to bring this into the UK and the US, and to start to really understand and scale the offering that we're doing, and then ultimately get on that journey to supporting, working and driving those strategic conversations. I think there's no small task launching two markets at the same time, but we're feeling really confident with the approach that we're taking, with the brands that we get to work with, the brand leaders that are all involved in ultimately opening up the world of consumer brands, of market research, and getting this confidence to the board level, to the CFO level. So the immediate job is the US and the UK, and then from there grow the team out, working with great brands. And ultimately continuing that on.
Nice. And is it realistic at all to think that you could become a B2B product of sorts, or is that just squeezing your sample sizes too much?
Right now we're focused on B2C companies and that consumer place. I think market research is huge, and there's so much that goes into it, and we've been quite intentional about what we say yes to and what we say no to, and that's being the best brand tracking and brand building partner in the consumer space. Hey, look, down the track, who knows? We'll keep a close eye on that. But right now, being really focused and doing what we do best, and making sure that we're continuing to narrow down, focus on what we're doing as best we can. So no to B2B in the immediate next few months. But that's one thing that we're looking at, is to say, how do we make sure that we're solving genuine problems with great solutions?
Time, weather, and...
Today's podcast is sponsored by No One. Whether you need research, brand, or strategy, No One brings you absolutely nothing. With simple templates and drag and drop tools, you can have a great looking nothing in minutes. If you have a real marketing challenge you'd like to chat about though, just email giles@gasp.agency and use the offer code GILES to get 10% off nothing. Brought to you by no one.
Time, weather, and...
I think I'm going to move to listener questions because I think if we do so now, I can get 3 in, which is one better than normal. So asking the general public for their opinion, be it on Brexit or boat names, is notoriously fraught with danger. But that's not stopped us asking. So we're going to have 3. I'm going to start with Evie. Evie says, New Zealand has often been missed off world maps. What Kiwi brands, people or agencies are putting New Zealand back on the world marketing map?
One that comes to mind immediately is the rapid growth of D2C over the last 10 years or so, and Allbirds in the shoes in the shoe space and responsible business building and the approach that they've taken. There's probably been one that we keep a good eye on, and I think is grown in a unique and distinct way.
I think James Herman is doing a lot, and his agency, Previously Unavailable, is making waves around the world with things like Future Demand, and he did somewhere like 7 different talks at Cannes, and he's becoming a very powerful thought leader, and he's got his course, the Masters of Advertising Effectiveness, and he's changing the game and doing that from New Zealand, which is really great. Special group. We're moving into their office relatively soon, which we're really excited about. But they won a Grand Prix at Cannes, last month, and we're really close to them. And Maddie's fiance works there, which is pretty cool. But they're doing great things on the world stage as well. I think Kiwis tend to punch above their weight in the brand and marketing space and creativity. So yeah.
Nice. Good. Question 2 is from Paul. Paul asks, Tracksuit is the latest of a growing group of businesses championing brand building, aka future demand. But what is it doing itself as a business lower down the funnel to deliver short-term revenue to fuel growth?
Yeah, I think that's a good question from Paul coming there, and I think right from the start, as we founded and created Tracksuit, we bootstrapped right from the outset for the first 18 months, and I think one of the things to fuel growth that we wanted to do, and what Connor and I were doing in the early days, is finding those initial customers that were buying into and fueling the initial growth of it, allowing us to build and really having that product market fit with the sales led approach that allowed us to find those first 10 customers that then helped us build case studies and then grow out from there, and to go from 10 to 250 brands that we work with across 4 markets is to take a really SaaS or software as a service approach compared to, I'd say, I can say the consultancy led model, where we're connecting with the best brands. We're building one at a time, making sure that we're building Tracksuit in a responsible way, keeping that bootstrap mentality around investing smartly in the right areas, but making sure that what we are doing is scaling in a way that allows us to maintain, grow the team out, bring brands on, and have a solid business underneath.
One fun thing to add in that people always find interesting, Matt and I have always been incredibly revenue focused, purely because we believe that the pressure cooker of having to find revenue in order to grow your business creates really good product market fit. And if you raise money too early from venture capital, or you have money that isn't customer revenue, it can, we sort of call it VC validation. Like you believe that you've got product market fit because there's money in the bank.
Yes.
Even though you don't. And then you start kind of falling into that trap of pouring money into conversion and bottom of funnel without actually knowing that it's going to work. And so we kind of did the opposite. We went out, we made a list of 80 brands that we thought we could talk to in New Zealand. We had meetings with 68 of them, and 11 of them ended up signing up as customers before we even had a product. So we basically said, hey, come on board. We'll deliver something to you in a month that will look like this. If we don't, we'll refund you. And 11 of them signed up. That allowed us to fund a developer to start building it through our partner, TRA. And then we built the MVP of the product and then signed up more customers a few months later and more after that. And so we've always been building alongside, listening to our customers and making sure that what we're building matches what they need.
Really smart. Yeah, great answer, both. I always enjoy talking to startup owners because they just have their finger on the pulse, and actually being frontline forces you to actually apply part of what you're preaching, but actually really do it. There's too few ad agencies that advertise anymore, and it's something that there's a wonderful chap, David Moore, or Elroy the Cat as he prefers to be known, who is sharing a huge archive of old ads from ad agencies. And it's important that, you know, you practice what you preach. So actually it's a really good question from Paul, given that your focus is on measuring brand, is, well, what do you have to do as a business from, you know, lower down the funnel to actually grow that business? Our last question, so we're taking it down a gear or two here, but I love this question. Quite ridiculous, but also the best drinking game I've ever heard of. So this comes from Beth, and Beth says, my best mate's Kiwi boyfriend told me about his favourite drinking game. He calls it possum. The rules are simple. You all get in a tree and drink until you fall out. It felt like the most Kiwi thing I've ever heard. What's your favourite story from growing up in New Zealand?
Well, I can confirm, I will confirm or deny that I've played possum in my life. Seems like a great game if I had ever played it. So I moved to New Zealand when I was 11 years old from the US, and my kind of fondest memory was like from that stage moving here, and like realizing that people don't really wear shoes. Kids in particular don't wear shoes, and you don't really have to wear shoes to school. I wore like sneakers to my first PE class, and the teacher told me off because I was going to stand on the other kids' feet. And so I was just this like young American kid who was completely blown away by just like, I don't know, this culture of like getting amongst it and going out and playing in the grass and in the mud. And I don't know, it was novel and awesome, and I loved it. And so that was my fond memory.
Obviously, there was a question around the All Blacks, and rugby is obviously synonymous with the New Zealand culture, and I think, you know, innovation and solving problems in garages. And I think looking at high school days, I think one of the best innovations that I saw combining the backbone of sport in New Zealand being rugby and innovation was our high school uniforms had velcro buttons. So they were buttoned up shirt. They looked like they had buttons, but underneath it was just actually velcro that went all the way down, so that at lunchtime playing tackle rugby and rugby out on the field, you know, as the shirts were being ripped, we didn't have to go back and try to get them sewed back up. Every now and then someone would have a proper shirt with buttons. And at a school of 2,500 boys running around on the field, you could always hear when someone had the buttons. They would rip, they would pop off, and it was like hearing a pin drop. You could, and everybody would stop, turn around, and say, "That kid's going to have to change the shirt." And Velcro buttons on school shirts, I think, is a fantastic piece that kind of summarizes the childhood growing up in New Zealand.
What an awesome thing. I love the idea that every now and then a kid turns up with real buttons. Like, an aristocrat.
Yeah, you knew it, and you could hear it right across the field.
That's wonderful. I love that. Oh, that's perfect. Brilliant. The final part of the interview then, Connor and Matt, is our 4 pertinent posers that we put to all of our guests. So number 1 is, what advice would you give to your younger self? So, Connor, do you want to take that one first?
probably buy Bitcoin, even though I, hate to admit it, but that would have been nice to do.
Yeah, there was a window of time, wasn't there? Nice. That's not come up before. Matt, any advice for your younger self?
I think I'd probably just keep saying yes to the opportunities, and who knows what comes from, but just trust it. And yeah, I was having a think about that before coming on. I think just say yes, capture those opportunities, and keep chasing them, and not really knowing where they were going to end up, but it's working out all right.
That's nice. There's a kind of theme. I don't think that's come up, word for word before, but there is a theme that tends to come up, which I find really encouraging. And I know that we have a lot of listeners who are studying, whether it's the early stage of their career or they've gone back to university or whatever it is. And I think with that comes a huge level of anxiety about there being a right way to be or a right way to behave to get their career off the ground. And I think there is that kind of element of serendipity and luck that comes with just being open to opportunities. So yeah, saying yes more to opportunities, I think that's a great piece of advice. Number 2, if you could banish one thing from the industry, what would it be and why?
I think that thinking that marketing departments and colouring in departments might be quite a good one that you touched on earlier there, Giles.
Do you think that's happening? Do you think that's slowly happening? I mean, I think maybe Connor, you hinted earlier that you think that there is the change is happening, like the boat's kind of changing, and I feel like certainly here in the UK, for speaking as a small indie, we've certainly seen that it's not happening as quickly as I would like, but I do think it's happening. Yeah,
I think if just off the back of that, I think there's a lot of great smart people working in marketing, advertising, and building brands, and I think there's really good ways to go about it, and there's really not so great ways to go about it. And so I think it's building trust and confidence and results coming off the back of it. So there's still absolutely a job to be done, but I think that confidence and understanding, I think of the impact of that marketing, that good marketing and effective marketing has on brand growth.
Yeah, 100%. Connor, what would you banish?
I think there's everyone is leaning in the same direction. Everyone is going back towards brand, but there are lots of people kind of arguing about the best way to do it, or kind of nitpicking about different things. But the general sentiment is in the same direction. And I just would love it if everyone kind of realized that we were all talking about the same thing and just kind of pushed forward, because it's only going to discredit the industry to be kind of fighting amongst ourselves. And so it seems more practical to kind of lean in and champion each other and champion brand for the good of the industry and the good of brands globally. So that's what I would love to see.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah, and it's not an exact science anyway, is it? So actually there needs to be a bit more tolerance for other people's ways of interpreting things.
Totally.
Number 3, we'll start with you on this one, Connor. Are there any books that you can recommend to our listeners?
I really love the book Travels with Charlie in Search of America by John Steinbeck. People are probably looking for marketing books here. If you haven't read Future Demand, definitely go read that, but also have a little break and read Travels with Charlie in Search of America by John Steinbeck.
Brilliant. No, they don't have to be work related at all. That's nice. In fact, it's amazing how many listeners get in touch and praise non-marketing books that come up that they've then tucked into, and thank a past guest a few months down the road. So no, that's great. Matt, have you got any that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think for me, Shoe Dog: The Nike Story by Phil Knight. I think that's a really great read that I enjoyed. I think the story of where it started from, how it was built, is Shoe Dog, Phil Knight. Great
cool.
book.
Great. Well, we'll link to those. And then number 4 is we always dedicate every episode to someone, and we bestow or hospital pass that honour, depending on your view, to our guest or guests in this instance, who have to give their reason why.
Mine's fairly simple. I would love to dedicate it to my mother.
Perfect. Can we have a name? First name, maybe?
Oh, her name's Victoria.
Victoria.
And she passed away a couple of years ago, but an absolute legend.
Perfect. I'm sorry to hear that, but that's a great dedication.
Yeah, I think I'd like to dedicate this episode to to our amazing team at Tracksuit that's in here, working hard, looking at this, but then also the friends and families that support us around it. My fiance Natalie as well. It is in there. I think we're all all consumed by what we do on a day-to-day basis, and realizing that there's a whole lot of things outside of work that allow us to do what we're doing and be able to lean on each other, the teams, families, friends. So that's what I'd like to dedicate this episode to.
Perfect. Amazing. Well, this episode is very proudly dedicated to Victoria. It's also dedicated to the team at Tracksuit, to Matt's fiancée Natalie, and to the collective friends and family that have enabled the success that you're enjoying now, and long may that continue. So as a final call to action, we will list and link to everything we've discussed, including Shoe Dog, Future Demand, Travels with Charlie in Search of America. We'll link to Tracksuits. But how else can our listeners get more Connor and Matt?
LinkedIn. I basically live there. You can DM me on LinkedIn anytime.
Tracksuit.com and then LinkedIn. We're there. We're all the time, and we're very open and active on LinkedIn. So that's a great place to start.
Perfect. Okay. Well, there'll be linked to both LinkedIn profiles, to the Tracksuit website, and to Tracksuit's company profile also. Listen, both of you, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed it hugely, particularly liked cookie-pocalypse, because I've never heard of that, and I've written it down and circled it countless times. But thank you for talking us through Tracksuit, through your early days. Thank you for talking to us about velcro buttons, genius, and everything we've covered.
Thank you, Giles. Really appreciate it. It's been a great time.
Thanks, Giles. Loved it. Great conversation. Let's do it again.
Yes, cheers, pal. Thank you. Finally, thank you to everyone listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do share and review the pod. Keep your questions and guest requests coming in. To get in touch, it's easy to find Gasp online, or email the mouthful, that is calltoaction@gasp.agency.
I can't get no call to action. I can't get no call to action, but I try, and I try, and I try, and I try. I can't get no call to action. Oh, I can't get no call to action. Yeah.